Shalom. Let's talk about this week's parasha, the Torah portion, which is Balak, Numbers 22:2 through 25, verse 9. The Haftarah is Micah 5, verse 6 through 6, verse 8. And the New Covenant portion is 1 Corinthians 1:20 through 31. But I'm going to use a different New Covenant portion, which is Galatians 3, verses 8, 9, and 14. I want to start this portion off by reading from Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. This is important because we will see this idea come up again and again in this portion. I also want to start by going to the last portion, and we even talked about this specific verse about that Israel was, they asked Sihon, the king of the Amorites, to go through his land. They said, we will not turn off the field into your vineyard. We will not drink water from your wells. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your borders. But Sihon did not agree to that. They ended up going to war and he was defeated. The same thing basically happened with Og, the king of Bashan. And so the fear of Israel started falling on the inhabitants of the land. And that is where we get to today in this week's parasha. In Numbers chapter 22, starting in verse 2, Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, meaning the people of Israel, for they were numerous. And Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. And we go on down a little bit further in verse 4. It says, Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of Moab at the time. So he sent out an invitation to Balaam to come and curse the people of Israel so that he could defeat them. So he sent a group of people to Balaam and they said, come please and curse the children of Israel. And in verse 12 of Numbers 22, God said to Balaam, do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So they went back home. This time, he sent another delegation, even bigger, and also with some wealth and riches to give to him to make him agree to come and curse the people of Israel. And in verse 20, God came to Balaam at night and said, if the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, you shall do. Well, we don't know exactly what happened, but obviously God didn't want him to go. We go on in chapter 22 of Numbers in verse 21. Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. But God was angry because he was going. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. God didn't want him to go. So God sends his angel. And what happens next is one of the greatest stories in the Bible, right? So in verse 23, it's still in 22. Now, Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. But Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back into the way. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path of the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself to the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. The angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn to the right hand or the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with his stick. And the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And then Balaam said to the donkey, because you have made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now. The donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you? And he said, no. And then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam. Balaam had spiritual blindness. He could not see what the Lord was really doing. But now the Lord has opened his eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed all the way to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out as an adversary because your way was contrary to me. But the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you just now and let her live. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the way against me. Now then, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back. But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you shall speak only the word which I tell you. So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. All right, so he goes with them and he says, all right, put up 7 altars, offer the offerings, and then I will speak what the Lord will have me to speak, basically. So in chapter 23, verse 4, now God met Balaam and he said to him, I have set up the 7 altars and I have offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. And then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak and you shall speak thus. So he returned to him, and behold, he was standing beside his burnt offering, he and all the leaders of Moab. He took up his discourse and he said, all right, this is what Balaam is now going back to say to Balak. And I'm going to just skip some verses, but he says that he had told him, come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. And in chapter 23, verse 8, he says, how shall I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? And it seems that he was very familiar with the verse I read at the beginning in Genesis 12:3, that God says concerning Israel, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you, because he knows that the Lord is not cursing them. And then in verse 10, he says, who can count the dust of Jacob or number the 4th part of Israel? Once again, it looks like he is so familiar with these verses. And this is straight out of Genesis 13:16, where God is talking to Abraham. He says, I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth. So that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. When we get down still in Numbers 23 to verse 11, Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have actually blessed them. And he replied, must I not be careful to speak what the Lord puts in my mouth? So they go to another place. And this time, Balaam says, God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and he will not do it? Or has he, meaning God, has God spoken and he will not make it good? Behold, I have received a command to bless. When he has blessed, I cannot revoke it. When we go down just a few more verses, we get into this one verse that really applies to us today. And this was the name of the operation that was given when Israel struck Iran just a few weeks ago. And it was referred to in Israel as Amkilavi, or rising lion. And this is what we see in chapter 23, verse 24. In Hebrew, it says, Hen Amkilavi yakum v'ka'ari itnase lo ishkav ad yochal teref. And in verse 24 in English, it says, behold, a people rises like a lioness. And as a lion, it lifts itself. It will not lie down until it devours the prey. So obviously, Balaam didn't curse them then either. And so Balak says, come on, let's go to one more place and you curse them here. And in chapter 24, when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek omens, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes and he saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he took up this discourse. And this is what he said in verse 5. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. And then at the end in verse 9, blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. And in verse 10, Balak's anger turned against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have persisted in blessing them these 3 times. So, as we've seen thus far, even though Balaam went with him these 3 times, the curse, what Balak wanted him to do, which was curse Israel, he ended up blessing them. Because the truth was, this was a people that was blessed by the Lord. And as long as they were walking in the ways of the Lord, they could not be cursed because the blessing of God was upon them. When we get into chapter 25, however, we see that somebody did, it was really Balaam, did find a way to bring a curse upon Israel. And that was by making Israel to sin. And in chapter 25, verse 1, it says, while Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their God, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. So the real way to curse Israel was to make Israel to fall into sin. And this was what Balaam did. He made the women of Moab entice the men of Israel into sin, and God was angry. Now, the whole camp was there, and all of a sudden, this Israeli man shows up with a Moabite woman. But what had happened then was Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it. He arose from the midst of the congregation and took a spear in his hand. He went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through the body. So the plague on the sons of Israel was checked. Those who died by the plague were 24,000. And that's where we end this week in this parasha. So the moral to the whole parasha is the blessing is on the people of God as long as they are in proper relationship with God, loving them, Him, seeking Him, and following His commands. But when they stop seeking the Lord and go into idolatry, going after things God never asked them to do or wanted them to do, but specifically commanded them not to do, that was when the umbrella of blessing left them and the curse came upon them and the plague hit the people. But the verse I wanted to end with today is, like I said at the beginning, in Galatians chapter 3, verses 8, 9, and 14. Because remember, we started with Genesis 12, verse 3, God saying to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. God was letting Abraham know that through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, through the Jewish people, blessing would come to the entire world. And in Galatians, we see how this was fulfilled. This is Galatians 3:8, the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, all the nations will be blessed in you. So then those who are of faith are blessed with Abraham, the believer. And in verse 14, in order that in the Messiah Yeshua, the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we would receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. So that the ultimate fulfillment of this beautiful verse in Genesis 12:3 was that through the Jewish people, God brought the Messiah. And through Messiah, Yeshua, he brought salvation to everybody, even in the nations, who would believe in him and call on the name of the Lord. I hope you have a great day.